Hi everyone, welcome back to the Turtle Wins the Race. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Turtle Wins the Race home-based business podcast. My name is Kara Buntin, and I've owned a home-based business since 1999. So I have lots of stories to tell, and I have one today about one of my least favorite phrases, and this is one of my pet peeves, and I have many of those. That is the phrase, "There's enough business for everyone." Okay, that is a huge load because when you say that, you're basically probably trying to make yourself feel better about something. Like you see the competition increasing and you're like, "Oh, there's enough business for everyone. It's okay." Or somebody does something dirty to you and you're like, "Oh, there's enough business for everyone." Well, no, that's not true. Okay? Supply and demand exist. And by saying there's enough business for everyone and kind of brushing it off, that just shows a lack of understanding of that. If there was enough business for everyone, no business would ever go bankrupt. No business would ever close. We know that there's not enough business for everyone, but nobody seems to want to talk about this. Okay, but let's talk about it because I think this is just something that you need to know for yourself and admit. Just admit it. There's not enough business for everyone. If you make something and you have an emotional investment in that product, let's say I use quilting all the time as an example. Let's say that you've made these beautiful quilts. Okay. It took you a long time. You're going to have to price it pretty high. Okay. To get, because it takes a long time and they're valuable. But there might not be enough demand for that thing at that price to build a full business around it. And you need to be really realistic about this. And there are ways around it. You can do something that is not as elaborate. You can do something that is smaller. There's things that you can do to kind of bring the time down so that you can charge less. But maybe you don't want to do that. And that's fine. But you need to understand that just because you have to charge what you charge for a product, it might not sell as often. You might end up making just as much money as someone who sells a bunch of cheap quilts because they're selling things at the cheap, and they're not making as much profit. You might sell one quilt and make as much profit as someone who sells 20, which is actually good. But it's also harder to find those customers because the supply doesn't always equal the demand. And just because one goes up or down, it doesn't mean the other one follows. And I was talking to a wedding planner once, who's one of my favorite wedding planners. Whenever I walked in and saw her, or I knew that it was her bride that I'd been working with, it was great because I knew everything was going to be fine, and she's very nice. I was setting a cake up, and she was there, and we were talking about the fact that so many people during the pandemic decided that they were going to be wedding planners, or they were going to make wedding cakes because they'd been laid off, and they're like, "What else can I do? I need some money. I'll be a wedding planner. I just got married. I know what to do." And that's not necessarily the best reason to go into business for yourself, but we'll leave that aside. But she was saying, "Oh, yeah, but there's enough business for everyone." And I said, "Oh, no, there's not." And we had this conversation. At the end of it, she was like, "Yeah, you're right." And she was just mad about something, which was completely legitimate at the time, because when the market is flooded with people who are increasing the supply, even if the demand doesn't increase, if let's say the demand stays the same, if the supply rises, then prices start to drop because people start competing on price. Now, if the supply rises and the demand rises, that's okay. That's a stable thing. But in general, just because the supply increases, it doesn't mean that the demand rises too. And sometimes, let's think about fidget spinners. Okay, there might be times when the demand for something really outstrips the supply, because then you can charge more because there's not as many of them, so they're more valuable. It's a supply demand thing. But then the demand will drop, and suddenly the supply is way up here because everybody started making them, and now you can't find anyone to buy it, so you start dropping your prices. This is basic economics, okay? And it's something that you just need to keep in mind as you are pricing your products, as you are deciding what to make. That's a big thing. And part of what's going on Etsy right now is that the competition has really risen because Etsy has no bar to entry. It's 20 cents to start a business on Etsy, 20 cents. it's not even a low bar to entry. That's like a no bar to entry. And Etsy is trying to do some things to slow this down, but not really, like the payment reserves, they're making it look like that's going to slow it down. And I saw an article about that and they're like, oh, it's because no, that doesn't slow it down. It just makes these people say, okay, I have to wait longer to get my money. Okay. But when the supply rises so much because people see no bar to entry, then the prices are going to start dropping. It doesn't mean the demand is increasing, and there's not enough business for everyone. What's been going on, and I'm talking about the market being flooded, blah, 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 is that when so many people are starting to sell on Etsy, a lot of what I'm seeing, it's coming from bloggers. And I think that we can actually learn a lot from this perspective. And it kind of is what I've always done personally, is that when I start selling something, I don't go to look to see what's the most popular. I go to look to see what has the least competition. So part of it is understanding that just because you love to make something and that you think it's a good product and it's a beautiful thing, it doesn't necessarily mean there's a buyer for that at the price that you would need to charge. But the other thing is to understand that competition is really, really important. It's incredibly important, and you need to pay attention to that. And when people say to niche down, maybe that might be okay if there's not a ton of competition in that niche. So let's say that you make beaded bracelets. I'm just trying to think of something that has a lot of competition, and there's a lot of competition for beaded bracelets. Let's say that you make beaded bracelets and you're like, I'm going to sell these on Etsy. These are great. And everyone's going to love them. And there's a lot of demand for this on Etsy. There might be, but because there's also so much supply, the prices tend to drop. And we all know that there are a lot of resellers in the jewelry in every category, really. There's a lot of resellers in every category. There's resellers in my category at this point. There's a lot of resellers, and when the supply increases, the demand doesn't necessarily increase, but the prices start to drop. So a lot of the way that you have to deal with this is just branding and that kind of thing, and positioning yourself as a higher quality, and that is a little bit of marketing that gets thrown into there. But you need to understand that just because you like your product and you think it's kind of like the art versus analytic. And I've said that I always have looked at this through a competition lens. When I look for SEO terms, I look for the less competition. And I've done that for years before I started blogging, before I started doing anything with keywords, really. That's just kind of an intuitive thing for me, that I'm like, I want to get in there where there's very little competition. And then I don't have to work as hard because I can find these little competition niches that have low competition, and it'll all add up. And basically what has been going on Etsy is that bloggers recently it's a very long progression in the blogging world. Bloggers tend to look at ways to make money based on their websites and their blogs. They use ads, they use affiliate links, they will do drop shipping. That's kind of started before the pandemic. I think a lot of people did drop shipping of products. They white labeled products and said they were theirs, the whole thing. So that's another way that they make money. But just recently, I've seen a lot of things popping up with digital, like selling digital products on Etsy. And the idea is you publish it once, then it just sells over and over and over, and you're good. You don't have to worry about it after that. So there's this whole movement on YouTube and in other places where bloggers who are coming at this from an analytical perspective. They're not artists. They're not making anything that they are emotionally attached to. They are looking at this purely from an analytical perspective and saying, what is a niche on Etsy that doesn't have a lot of competition? And that's what I'm going to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that we kind of look at this and go, oh my God, that's so mercenary. It's like, yeah, because they're trying to make money. It's mercenary. But it's the art versus analytic. And yeah, artists have that reputation. I don't think it's fair that we don't know numbers, But you have to think about keywords, just even keywords, even if you're not going to change what you sell. Think about the keywords that you use and try to find the least competitive ones. If you have one keyword that's super competitive, it's going to be very difficult to be found on Etsy for that keyword because it's competitive and there's going to be so many listings that use it. But if you find keywords that are less competitive, it's much more likely that you will be shown for those searches, and they do add up. And just, the way that keywords work is not a direct word order match. I think people are very confused about that. And I go over this in my eShop program with the SEO section, which I am actually going to be closing the eShop program at the end of this year. Just a heads up, it will never be offered again unless I have a really good reason to let somebody in, but it's going to be closed. But I will have I still have an SEO membership, so we go over that kind of stuff there. But yeah, for keywords, I've always looked at the less competitive ones, and my logic is, and this does work, and this is what bloggers do, is that when you get the less competitive keywords, you will rank better and your traffic will come because a lot of people search for long tail keywords. They search for things that are less competitive in different ways. So if I have let's say I have a birthday cake decoration in my shop and I put birthday cake decoration. Okay, that's pretty competitive. That's going to be pretty competitive. If I put 5th birthday cake decoration or 6th birthday cake decoration or birthday cake decoration for twins or birthday cake decoration for tweens, right? Or for tween girl. I think I used that example once. The more specific keywords are less competitive because not as many people have those in their listings. And if you have enough of that information in your listings, you're going to be found for a lot of less competitive keywords, and the competition is going to be lower, so you're probably going to show up better in search results and get ranked higher. So that's what the bloggers are doing, and that's what artists tend not to do. We don't go after it that way. We go after it with the art first, like, here's my product, it's a great product, you're going to like it, now let me think about the keywords. Bloggers go, what keywords can I get in on, and that's what I'm going to make. So it's a different perspective, but what it boils down to is that you have to find a niche, and you have to find a niche that doesn't have that much competition because there's not enough business for everyone. If you can weasel your way in to a niche that does not have as much competition so that the supply is lower, then you're going to be able to be found easier. And even if the demand is lower for that more specific thing, it's going to be able to find you because there's not a million listings competing. So when you're doing your keyword research, and I've done this, like I said, I've always done it this way. And when I blog now, I look for keywords first and topics, and then I write the blog article. I don't say, oh, I think I'll write about this today. I go and I do the keyword research first. I find what I think I can rank for, and that's what I write. So it's a different perspective. I think that we can learn a lot from this. And we can also learn that if you're actually making something handmade, it might be a good idea to go open your own website or go sell on Go Imagine, because that is a handmade platform and you will be able to sell on there if you're in the US. It's not outside the US, but yeah, get your own website because it's just important to have a footprint in more than one place. Leave me any questions. I know this is kind of a short one, but there's not enough business for everyone. Yeah. And we need to be realistic about that. Find niches that have less competition. You're going to be better off. I will talk to you later.